Yes, Worksession.
There we go. We're good.
All right, so here we are starting our work session, and first item is the Rock Creek Parkway Underpass Facade Treatment. Mr. Magley.
Thank you. This is one of our 2011 CIP projects. This is phase 2 of this particular project. Phase 1 was completed last year, which took care of our water leaks on the underpass, and now we need to dress it up. So Kurt Kohr, our Public Works Director, has prepared a presentation, and we'll answer any questions.
Great, thanks.
Kurt Kohr, Public Works Director. Good evening, Mayor and Board. As Matt said, we are going to be talking about the Rock Creek Parkway Underpass sequel project. Just a little location slide to dial everybody in on where this is at. Has everyone had a chance to walk through this area at some point in time and kind of familiar with what we're talking about? So for those watching on TV, this area is located just east of McCaslin Boulevard on Rock Creek Parkway, underneath Rock Creek Parkway. Last year in 2009, or the winter of 2009, these are some shots, and this is kind of a overall of what we attempted to fix with our 2010 project. You can see a lot of icicles along the top, and all those icicles, for the most part, are coming out of the joints of the underpass. This underpass is made up of 26 three-sided concrete box culverts, and as those joints have deteriorated or may not have been constructed properly in the first place, we had the water seepage come in. A little background on that. It had been a historical CIP that had never been completed and carried out through the years. I believe some reasons just were maybe uncertainty into how to attack the problem. Other areas may have been budgetary concerns or constraints at the time. So phase 1 was accomplished in 2010. The budget we had approved in 2010 was $80,000. Through a competitive bid with 2 respondent bidders, we put in a contract with Bear Excavating for $45,000, and at the end of last year, our actual costs were around $33,000. So it's the kind of trend we like to see in our projects if we can pull it off.
And I had a question about that. So the delta between those, is that because of the sandblasting didn't occur, or is that actually just
part of it
some
is the
negotiating?
sandblasting, and then part of it was we were able to just kind of do some due diligence in advance and try to identify some products that we thought would work, and then I think part of it was we just got a good bid. So a combination of things. Sandblasting was probably about a $15,000 portion that did not come out of that 2000 budget that probably should have and would be a consideration for this year's budget.
So I have a, is this working? I have a quick question. I'm just wondering why we only have 35,000 left when we started with 80.
The 80,000 was for the 2010 budget. The 35,000 was a result of the 2010-2011 budget process where different priorities competed, and at the end of the day, our original request for this project was about 55,000 during the process, and it got reduced to 35. So just through the priorities and the competition of needs.
All right.
One thing we haven't really talked about much, it's something that I like to discuss when we come to projects that are more aesthetic in nature. Most of our projects that we are going to take on, make decisions together on, increase or affect the community in 3 ways. It's either going to increase the value of your community, increase the aesthetics, you're replacing kind, and it's going to keep things status quo, or maybe there's some cost considerations and you do something a little differently that decrease the value of the community. And I think it's important to determine what the overall goal is for this board when you're working with the community and determining all the priorities. Sometimes these aesthetic considerations on projects get caught up in costs or other things, the look. But I think it's easier to determine what you want to do if we can all determine if the main goal is to stay net neutral with what we have, or do we want to take this opportunity, because it's a 10 or a 20-year life cycle on this, to increase the aesthetics in that area. So if we can come to terms on that on some of these aesthetic projects, it's easier to determine what happens after that. So phase 2, what we are now calling phase 2, we would go into the existing underpass. We would sandblast off the old coating. We would install new conduit and lighting. There's some electrical metal conduit along the roof there. It would be LED lighting, so it would be energy efficient. We are considering adding additional lighting to try to light it a little better than it may be right now. We would install a new aesthetic treatment that we will discuss today, what that may be. And the target completion for all of this, given we kind of stay within our original schedule, would be somewhere in June through September. So different treatment options that we've looked at, and if there's other options you feel we should have looked at, feel free to bring them up, and we can certainly do more due diligence to figure those out. But as I had stated, the 2011 budget through the budget competition, priorities and needs, $35,000 was the final budget that we ended up at. Public art would be one consideration. Your guess is as good as mine at this point as to what that might cost. Certainly an interesting process to go through to see what the artist could bring to the table. Painting it or waterproof epoxy, both of those would provide very similar looks. The waterproof epoxy, it's kind of a cementitious material and would have kind of a stucco appearance, so a little rougher. The advantage of this is that it's a little more rigid. It can withstand water pressure. And so that's why we provided that as an option over the paint, even though it would have the same look. So the reason I talk about that is some of these joints we do have a little bit of leaking. And we do have the ability with our contract from last year coming up this spring to go into some of those places we've identified that might still have a small trickle and kind of button those up. There still is a possibility that you could have the water could travel and find another route over time. And so painting we would paint, but we wouldn't be able to seal up these joints as well. You may still have some minimal leaks. The waterproof epoxy would pretty much guarantee that we're buttoning it up for good. One of the things we discussed when you as a board approved the original contract with Bear Excavating is they do have a clause in their contract that they are responsible for getting this thing watertight. But it doesn't stipulate how fast. We probably got 95% of the problems taken care of, if not more. But that 1 or 2%, if we want to wait, Bear would certainly honor their contract and come back as they need to. But if we want to go forward and treat with some sort of aesthetic treatment, I think there's a point where Bear will say, well, it's one thing for us to come back and keep the existing condition and get it watertight. But if you put on a new aesthetic treatment, and that would provide us additional cost to fix leaks, they would have a problem with that, I think. So we do have contract protection with Bear Excavating, and I want to make sure you know that. But at the same time, if we want to move forward with aesthetics, then we may have to give up some of that contract language. And so that's kind of the philosophy around the waterproof.
Along these lines, so the surface that's on the ceiling, if you will, is that structural in any particular way, or that was purely an aesthetic
It's
application?
purely aesthetic. It almost looks kind of like it looks like stucco, but it's very flexible. Mm-hmm. It's almost like it was, I'm not sure what the material is, to be honest with you.
So if they sandblasted that off, you just have concrete underneath it, right?
Exactly.
So that would be one choice, is just to leave it as
You could leave
concrete.
it bare. You could sandblast and leave it bare. The concrete under that appears to have a very irregular surface. I don't know how smooth it may appear. I don't think it'll have the visual appeal of maybe a concrete surface that had planned and constructed to be bare. And I'm not sure with some of the water issues there, if the sandblasting will make it look a little rougher. But
And so, and with the stone veneer, so that obviously isn't going to go on the ceiling or whatever the appropriate term would be. So that, you'd pick a paint or an epoxy in addition to that for the
We would.
ceiling or whatever?
We would, and that is included.
And that stone veneer is for both sides or just one?
That would be for both sides. And I was going in the paint, but I can jump ahead. So what we try to do is do some visualizations. It looks like the optimization kind of threw off the color. But essentially, this is existing. This would be the paint or epoxy. So a little cleaner look. The veneer, there's your veneer look. That would be on both sides. And then the top would, I think we had costed in the epoxy for the top on that option.
That veneer, is that, it's like stone, right?
It's stone.
Textured.
Just lick and stick.
Yep, pretty much.
Is it, what do we call it, superior red or superior sandstone? I forget what it is.
That looks beautiful, though.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it would
Very
match
classy.
the outside of the bridge. That's the
Yeah, that looks
intent.
very nice.
Yeah.
Kurt, back to the estimates. Are all of those including the $15,000 for sandblasting
They
that
are.
was not done?
Yeah, the prices you see here are all inclusive. I think we have like a 5% contingency on them in addition.
On the 35,000 budget, you said it was at 55,000 at one point, but then it was reduced to 35?
Yes, our original. So when we were going through the budget process, it was kind of mid to getting towards later in the year of last year. We were on track with our original budget. We thought we were going to spend $15,000 to do the sandblasting in 10, and so we had requested 55 to cover the painting.
Okay.
And then since that request, the budget got reduced to $35,000 for the approved budget, and the sandblasting did not get done. So there's kind of a double hit
Right.
there, and that's why we're seeing the budget discrepancy at this point.
At the time of the budget reduction, even when the original budget was proposed, we didn't know these expenses here were going to be this high? Like waterproof epoxy was 75,000?
The estimate was 55,000.
55, yeah.
Okay.
So we were a little off for the epoxy. We were really we had been given guidance to focus on the paint
Okay.
as the preferred option.
Yeah.
Kurt, on the public art option, what I would have in mind there is actually having Monarch High School and/or University of Colorado art students propose it. It
Okay.
goes out to a contest or something. We pick the best, and therefore they're building their student portfolio.
Okay.
So maybe in that case, we pay for materials, we get labor-free, that kind of thing. What kind of undertreatment would you foresee needing to be done to make the walls ready for public art?
I think at a minimum, we would need to sandblast and possibly maybe do some of the waterproofing in advance. It's probably also a function of what they would propose.
And we have to paint the ceiling.
And
Yeah, we still have to do the ceiling.
Kurt, I had questions about actually the painting and then the veneer. If either one of those get graffiti on them, one, if you have a public painting on there, then does that kind of ruin the art? And how do you?
It could. I mean, that would be a consideration for any public art project you do. Graffiti's a threat, and so
Right.
that has to be a discussion I think we have when we see what's being proposed. In regards to the painting, the epoxy would be more resistant to
Right.
graffiti. It's very abrasion resistant, so we could get in there and clean it better.
And then the veneer would have, it seemed like the same kind of issues. It'd be more difficult to get graffiti off of there.
It would, your guess is as good as mine if it'll get tagged. But you tend not to see tagging on the stone treatments. I just haven't seen that in our community. Certainly the bare concrete, they get that pretty well. But there seems to be so far a threshold that hasn't
But
been crossed.
historically, that part of Superior has not been tagged.
Correct. Yeah. In fact, I don't think I see
I've been
any.
working there for about 15 years. I can't even remember if it was ever had graffiti on it for whatever reason, so.
Yeah, I haven't observed any areas in there where it looks like it's been covered up.
using the graffiti motif, I don't know if anybody read was it Denver Post or whatever, that actually there are some buildings out there that are actually becoming canvases, delivered canvases for graffiti. So that would actually be another potential option here, is actually that this is your, and
This is
it's
your
done in that,
canvas.
it's
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
that very high style graffiti that, whatever, and we'd have things, no foul words, that
Do we
kind of
want
thing.
that? I mean, that's the thing.
No, I'm just throwing it out there as a possibility.
I don't know. I mean, we could get you costs, but you could attack this incrementally. We could sandblast, we could get it cleaned up, we could plan to do the top. If you wanted to experiment with some sort of option like that, you could see where it goes. If it's successful, great. If not, maybe we have to sandblast a little more to
Clean
re-prep.
it up.
But you may not be out much to try that.
Well, it would only be on one side.
Right.
Because the other side, you'd have to cross the water. That just wouldn't make sense.
So that is the other
Well,
question.
I think we should plan for both sides. I think they would.
No, I'm just saying, the painting, if we did the public art part of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you could do
Unless it
stone
was
veneer on
gigantic.
one side, the one side where people can access,
Right.
for instance, and then just have the other side for public art.
Well,
Yeah, you
actually,
could.
she's proposing, they're both public art, they're just different forms.
Yeah.
It could. You could go both ways. I
But
mean,
either way, if you're sort of leaning to the public art option, either high school, university, artist in the community or something, or this fourth option of graffiti, which I'm by no means espousing, but I did find it was an interesting way to incorporate that as an art form done in other communities. You would still, I think, have to finish that other wall, the wet wall, the water-bound wall, in some fashion, either sandblasting it or whatnot, fixing it up to some extent.
yeah, someone said both options. So maybe you have the open canvas on one side and the high
Stone on the
school,
other
or
side?
yeah, a lot of ideas, a lot of good ideas.
And in terms of the life expectancy of these things, I assume stone veneer is permanent, relatively, for all intents and purposes. The water epoxy versus the paint, what's the,
I think they're
upkeep of those?
both going to last a relatively long time. They're pretty much out of the elements. I think at the joints you could see the paint deteriorate if we had some water come through still. The epoxy, this is the epoxy that we're talking about. It's kind of the stuff they put in fountains and pools. So this got some longevity to it.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's kind of what we've come up with, and we'll certainly take whatever guidance you feel is appropriate for the community, and move that forward to the next step.
I mean, I'm partial to the stone veneer. It looks very classy. It looks great. Obviously, it's more expensive, so is it worth it to spend the extra $10,000 more than?
From my perspective, at least doing one side with it, I'm partial to the stone veneer myself, and I think it probably has permanent life expectancy, so
Right.
there's some upside to that. So
It looks
it's
beautiful.
consistent with what's in the bridge right now.
Yeah, it looks. Yeah,
Yeah, I would agree. Graffiti aside, I think the stone veneer looks the best.
In terms of the surface, then, it would be paint versus epoxy versus seeing how things go and doing it at a different time if we think Bear's going to need to do some remediation.
Yeah, actually, if the veneer was a preferred alternative, we really aren't worried as much about migration along the walls.
Right.
So we could certainly sandblast, do the veneer, maybe do a phase 3. We watch the top through the summer and continue to work with Bear under their contract, and then phase 3 we could come back and do the epoxy or paint, whatever we felt was good.
My inclination is to actually do it incrementally, to sandblast it, see it, what it looks like. I don't have a problem with the look of concrete,
Okay.
I don't. So I would propose doing it incrementally,
Okay.
seeing what it looked like in the
Okay.
raw, allowing a little bit of time to see if it's still leaking, et cetera, et cetera. I guess I don't feel an urgency necessarily to decide.
Yeah, we could certainly develop an approach where we do one thing, check in.
And these would be these would be different contracts, right? So the sandblasting would be done by a contractor that is different from the painter versus who's putting up the veneer. Is that true?
Most likely. I mean, if we were going for it all, we'd probably just bid it as one package so that we have one person providing us one warranty and not trying to coordinate 3 warranties. But if we want to spread it out, we can certainly manage that as well. I don't think that should be the decision point on this.
And my thoughts on this, I am partial to the stone veneer. Although I love public art and would love to incorporate that into our town. However, paying for public art, I would rather put it somewhere very visible, more prominent, because it's part of our town. Being public art is kind of a branding of what our town is looking like. And although it'd be nice to put that, some kind of public art on there, I do like Sandy's idea that if, it's some art major's project for University of Colorado or wherever, that does render something free there, I suppose. But, anything more than that, I think we should relook at that.
Okay.
I'll just weigh in on doing it incrementally. I'm a little skeptical of how well the leakage will be defeated over time. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see the lighting and conduit done at the same time we're doing the sandblasting,
Okay.
so that we have good lighting under there.
Sure.
But we could see where we go after we see how this looks, and maybe wrestle with it in the budget for next year.
Okay.
Do we know, can I ask one more question? Do we know how much the stone veneer is just by itself if it was done on both sides? How much does that add to the cost?
I should know that number. I don't have it in my head. Just the veneer itself.
Ballpark? More than 10?
Oh yeah, it was like 20 to 40 range.
Okay,
It's
'cause
not
that-
cheap.
That to me makes sense to adding phase 2 or phase 3 into the project, and thus being maybe next year.
The veneer would be phase 3.
Or however phases you go, because the
Okay.
veneer, it can always be put on.
Yeah, we can do that at any time. The urgency is your urgency or the community's urgency. I'm not pushing this, just looking for input.
The time frame. So if we did it in phases, you have June to September for the target completion date, and then in the capital improvement tracking forms, it says fourth quarter completion. Is there any way to do it before the beginning of summer or closer to springtime so that it's used mostly?
It would, yeah.
Okay.
If we decided tonight, hey, I think what I'm hearing is incremental. Majority I'm hearing veneer right now. So we could certainly say sandblasting's a given, and we could get that going as quickly as we could. Try to get it out of the way before we get the high trail use patterns going on. See how it goes over the summer when irrigation and everything's fired up. Continue to attack any small leaks and budget phase 3 veneer for 2012.
So if we're talking phasing, is it possible to maintain the $35,000 budget for this year into phase 1? Would that get us where we need to be?
Yes, we could work within $35,000 for sandblasting.
Sandblasting, the conduit, and then can you seal it too? Any kind of sealing at all? So it's
The sealing would start to push. Part of the sealing process, we would go in with kind of a additional joint compound. So we would sandblast and attack leaks through Bear's contract and possibly do some joint compound if we needed to in the joints. That would be the bare minimum we would incrementally start with.
And we still are going to take this to the planning commission, get their comments, pro-stack, and then we'll bring back a recommendation to the
Okay.
board.
Yeah, we are scheduled with planning commission
With,
tomorrow.
with their input from those two committees, so.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Great.
Did I describe you guys okay? All right, great. Thank you.
All right. So I think that brings us to scheduling issues, calendar.
Yes, we've had a number of requests to meet with the board, so I thought maybe we could take some time at tonight's meeting, see if we could schedule some of these meetings. And some of them, you know, if we can't come to any consensus tonight, we can always attempt to do them offline as well. But provided some recommended dates that hopefully you've had a chance to look at. I used off Monday nights as kind of my starting point, because most people block those Mondays off, I believe. And with Lisa not here, we'll have to follow up with her, of course. But so if there's any conflicts with there, and if there's a preferred time frame as far as with the city of Louisville.
I would offer that on the future retreats, for me, April 4th is probably the best.
Okay.
July 18th almost surely would be a conflict,
Yeah, same.
I agree.
Okay.
and I don't know about October 17th. But that's probably be okay, but April 4th probably would be a good time.
You know, I wholeheartedly agree with that one. That would be perfect.
And we can, those outer days, we can maybe discuss at that meeting as well.
Okay,
We
that
can
sounds good.
suggest some alternative days.
All right. Hey,
So
Matt,
do we want to
following.
just take these one by one? And
So the 4th works for me, and the 18th potentially would be problematic.
So it sounds like April 4th might be a good day for that retreat.
Yeah.
And then, starting at the top, I had Louisville City Council. I mean, we want to look just at Mondays. They meet on Tuesdays, so I think...
Do they have any times in mind?
No.
Did they want to be sooner or later, or?
They didn't have a specific time period or dates.
Okay.
They just wanted to start the process of trying to figure something out, so I thought I'd get back to that.
I'd suggest sooner rather than later.
I'd like it to be after March 7th meeting, which isn't too
March.
late. We're tentatively scheduling an interchange meeting on the 7th.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's a
Oh,
good point,
okay.
yeah.
That's more than likely would be after that. anyway.
Right, yeah. So we want to try for something in May or sooner than that?
May sounds good.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
are all those dates that you have listed, those are Mondays?
Off Mondays, yeah.
Off
every
off
one of
Mondays.
those are?
Yep.
Except for what, well, okay, great.
Mondays are a good way to tackle them.
Yeah.
Tuesdays might not be bad if Louisville asks for that,
Right,
for me
yeah.
personally. I don't know about others.
And me as well.
It would depend on the exact date.
Okay. I'll call Malcolm
And
this week and see if we can
Give him some
work out
options.
Send you some options. yeah.
May would be better than April.
Okay. Okay, so we'll look at dates in May.
What?
We'll look at dates in May
Okay.
for that one. Then we have Open Space Advisory Committee, June 6th.
D-Day,
See.
that works
Yes.
for me.
Yeah, school's out and
Yeah.
I'm in town.
The
Yes, that would be
Planning
good.
Commission, April 18th.
I have a conflict with
Okay.
that, but if it has to proceed, then it can.
Okay.
Again, Mondays tend to be okay.
I'm good.
The 18th for me is April 18th. I potentially could get to some of that. I don't know if I can get to all of that one.
Okay. Well, depending on Lisa's response for that, we might reschedule that one.
Let's see how it goes.
Yeah. And then the HOA, I had a target date of May 2nd for that one.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's fine. Although you may want to leave that open for Louisville.
Right.
Might want to find
Yeah.
that out first.
What's more important, Louisville or HOA?
Both, equally.
Ian? I say HOA.
I'm out of town the third week in May.
So that was our goal setting. week, so I'll look for another date for that one. Because I prefer to have everyone there for that one, so.
For which one?
Goal
For May
setting.
That was the goal setting for May 16th. And then the last two items I had was spring break. Do we want to cancel the March 28th meeting?
I'm here.
I'm here.
And I'm here.
I'm here. I'm probably here also, so.
Spring break for BDSD is the week before, but they also have those 2 days
Those
off.
2 days, the
Yeah.
planning days afterwards.
Right, yeah. So,
We're coming back that day, most likely. I think we should be here by 6.
okay. So it sounds like it's a go for that one. Keep them.
It's, oh, we don't even have a meeting the week before that.
No.
Okay, that's good, because I'll be gone.
And then, as usual, we usually cancel the second meeting in December, and actually we're closed that day. So,
So I guess
I
that,
could come in,
You
but
got the answer.
and have a meeting if you want. But it's December 26th, though.
I think we can cancel that one.
that's a guarantee.
There's no meeting.
Yeah.
All right. So I will send out meeting dates for the Louisville City Council, the Planning Commission. We may have to reschedule, and then the goal setting. Anything else on the schedule?
So, wait, say that again? Those are the dates, those are the things that you say you need to send out new dates for?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So that was planning commission, goal setting, and what else?
Louisville City Council.
Municipal city council, okay.
Which didn't really have a date.
Yeah, right.
Right, and then, yes.
Last meeting, or the meeting before last, I had mentioned that I made contact with Jared Paulus's office, and he wants to come and attend one of our meetings.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And I was told at the time that we might want to reach out to other reps to come in. So how do we coordinate that?
We'll contact his office and see what meeting date he would like to attend,
Okay.
and then we'll send out an offer to the rest of our representatives and see if they want to come on that night or if they want to schedule another night.
Okay. So that's something that you or
Yeah.
staff will take care of.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Given the issues we have at hand, is it best to meet with them in a group or individually?
Run that one more time, I'm sorry.
Well, we have some pretty heavy-duty issues under consideration now. So when we meet with our legislators, do we want to meet with them individually or together?
Well, I think, I'm sorry, Andrew. The original purpose to have him here is he wants to get to every town's
Okay.
meetings. And then maybe at that time, we can talk to him about meeting one-on-one about other issues. But he wants to come in and get in front of
Oh,
constituents
he
and
wants
all
to
that.
present.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Well, yeah, just find a time that works for him. that
Okay.
Works for us, and then we can talk about our state reps. I assume the senators
Yeah,
are.
yeah.
The senators are probably not coming to town. Maybe they are, but
Maybe. Our state senators might.
our state senators.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank Primavera.
Yeah, no.
She was here, too, I remember that.
And Dan Gibbs has been here too.
That's right. State, was it State House or State Senate?
Senate.
Senate.
All right. Goals?
So can I just reiterate here on this first meeting request?
Uh-huh.
So we've set OSAC for June 6th, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
We have set a future retreat for April 4th,
Yes.
and we've canceled the December 26th meeting.
Correct.
That's it.
And the May 2nd date works, just depends on if we want to do Louisville or the HOA.
Okay?
And all those would be reflected in our schedule, in our look ahead.
Yeah. We'll put those on.
Okay, anything else about dates? All right,
For me.
goals?
So I've included a draft set of goals for the board to consider from my position. And just wanted to get the board's input on those, and I will go back based on the discussion we have tonight and make adjustments, revisions, and if we need to have another work session, I can schedule that. And I will, once I have some direction as far as what we want to include, I'll go back and start putting together some time frames, and I'll include a way to track where we're at with each of the goals, and then any other information that the board might want to include on there. I have included, these are in no particular order. I was just, as I was putting them together, as they were popping into my head, I was putting them on the chart. They include Town 9 Park, Town Center, open space, economic development, business retention, completion of the capital projects for the year, the McCaslin interchange, enhanced communications, town events, energy initiatives, the Jefferson Parkway, 2012 budget and goals, our trash recycling contract for our town, 3 parks, and then any others that the board may want to add. Happy to discuss any one of those and the objectives that I put in there. My other plan is, as we finalize these, I'll go through the objectives and clean those up, make bullet points of the specific objectives so we can track those more easily.
And you get these all done before the meeting in December.
Try.
For the December 26th meeting.
Yeah, for the December 26th meeting.
Yes.
Matt, for my, what I would like to see is I'd actually like, when you're done with all this, the whole process is complete, to have them actually in a priority order, most important at the top, least important at the bottom. And I like the idea, to have the specific goals bulleted and have that represented to us to make sure we're in sync with the specific goals. And the specific area of goals that I would like you to consider a couple of additions to would be under communications. I've got here the Granicus meeting minutes, the sync between the video and print to see
Okay.
where that lies, whether or not we're going to proceed with that.
Sure.
I'd like consideration of putting accounts payable on the home page to where residents can link into that very quickly. And then I'd like us to have a goal of increasing the number of emails that are in our e-blast notification list. The goal is to eventually, I hope we're somewhat near 100% of residents, at least 85-90% if we can reach that. So I'd like to see that to be a true goal.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. As far as the Shop Local campaign,
Yes.
I'm wondering if we can make that kind of a large campaign, one that is very visible. I think we've done one in the past that, most residents had no idea we had done one. So
Well, we put one together, but
we never executed it?
no.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense. Why no one knew about it?
Yep.
But yeah, I'd like to see that, be, some kind of, have a logo and a, somehow be something that we can be known for a little bit. I mean, not that I'm trying to compete with other cities, but just have it a little bit more visible.
Yeah. And most cities have one of those in place or whatever.
Right,
so, yeah.
exactly, so.
Yeah. Okay.
And I would say not to be, rain on anybody's parade. I think that they do nothing, because people will always shop with their wallet. I mean, very, very few people are going to say, well, want to spend 10% more so I can stay in town, I think, most people are going to figure out what the best value is for their family and go there, but. At least that's my perspective.
I think it's fair.
Well, actually, since I'm a trustee, I consciously think of trying to stay in Superior as far as shopping, but
Yeah.
that's just me.
Well, I think probably we all do, but I think that we're kind of an unusual branch of
We
the-
are an unusual.
We have to have businesses to go to.
That's
to
the
keep
key.
the money
That's
here.
true.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we make it, they will come, or if we build it, they
Right.
will come.
Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense to create a program if we don't have businesses in place.
However, there are
Shop
there are case studies we can look at to see how successful they've been. The one that comes to mind is the Durango study that was presented at CML. And then Erie, of course, started one, and, the results of that one will be in somewhere down the road, and we can ask them how well that worked.
Well, and then it definitely depends on how you execute it, whether it's going to be effective or not.
Agreed.
But anyway, that was one thought there.
I agree with Chris, though. Bring the businesses here first. Make it more variety. Be easier to shop here.
And then I was wondering if we were thinking about creating a mobile app that communicates to residents, kind of like a Twitter or a text updates on issues, upcoming events, closures, weather, and it's, such as an app that would be on your Android or your iPhone or.
Yeah, I thought I included that.
Or iPad.
Or iPad. Or
So
iPod.
on item
Can I
8,
put an app on this one?
But basically, the purpose of a mobile app is that it feeds you the information to your phone in real time.
right.
So that's remarkably simple.
And I didn't see it, but I
It's under item 8, and
Okay.
it's, I put mobile notification application. So, sorry,
okay.
it's kind of embedded.
No, it's in there. Yeah, you're right.
Spelled application.
Right.
App, man.
Yeah, gotta get the right words. Then, let's see here. And then I was curious if we were going to ever look at like a volunteer base, kind of create an a la carte menu for volunteers to pick and choose their projects based on like age, length of project, degree of difficulty, and the type of project, so that you can a la carte pick what you want and be a part of volunteering for your town.
I sure would like to see that, at least for snow shoveling.
Right, and yeah.
That's a good idea.
So, I mean, it's something to look into. I mean, getting it up and running is a whole different ballgame, but something to research and see if it's going to work for our town.
Okay.
And I can't remember, there's a couple of towns that do have it. I know that Boulder County, or is it Boulder City? I think it's Boulder County, that they are looking into some kind of a la carte menu that made it a lot easier, and I believe Longmont already has something like that.
Okay. We'll take a look at both of those.
I think Boulder has the volunteer connection.
Volunteer connection, yeah, which I
They've
think
had
it's
it for
not
years,
really.
Actually.
What's that?
They've had it for years.
Yeah, and I think it's independent from the city. I think it's my thought. My thinking was that I was independent. I don't know. I'm actually looking at it at the moment. So
Okay.
I have some data on that. I can get back to you and just
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great.
give you cities that have already done that, and you can just go to their website.
Okay. Anything you want to take out?
no, you have to get it all done. You put it in there.
Yeah, we'll take it out when you finish it.
I thought it was very helpful.
Yeah.
Malcolm over in Louisville sent his chart over to me, so I just stole his. And when
Stole
it's
the
similar to-
stole the format.
Yeah, sold the form.
Oh,
It's similar
yeah.
to something we've
I
used
was going
in
to say
the
he's
past.
fixing Arby's too. That's nice.
Yeah. So, appreciate him sending that over to me.
Oh, I can think of something you could take out, but, it might be a little controversial. But that's pursue wind technology.
I think what we should do
I
is
was
make a
waiting for that.
decision, make a decision about that.
We
but
do
not-
need to make this.
Yeah, we're going to
I
have
think
a
we
work session on it.
you could
so-
change the verbiage and analyze it maybe,
Yeah.
because I don't think anybody here has enough information about
Right.
deciding one way or
Yeah.
the other.
Okay.
Analyze also, I think, goes with the trash contracts. Don't we have a law that's going to come to a head on that renewal?
Well, it's out there to where if the board decided that they wanted to pursue that, we could look into it. But we don't. If the board decides they don't want to pursue that option, then we can just continue with their status quo.
My
Wasn't sure the law allowed us right now. That's what we have to look at, I thought. Past,
Yeah.
It's been a while since I looked at it, but I thought it gave us the option to,
I'd like to have the.
if you wanted to, you could, but didn't require it.
Yeah, it doesn't require. it.
That's, I think it's one of those
We
things
can-
when we'll have a meeting with the homeowners association and we can just see what they're, I mean, I think we all, at least most of us at least, I think, just want to work with the HOA, and if they're interested in changing whatever, then great, and if not, then I think I'm happy with the status quo.
I just wanted to make sure that that was not,
Yeah. Okay.
was something.
I'll make a note of that in here.
I believe we have, quite a bit of the HOA sitting in
That's-
there.
So, well, it'll be a good meeting.
The HOA meeting will be.
Anything else
On that particular subject, you mean?
for the work session, I think?
Oh,
Unless
yeah.
I'm losing track.
Then I would like to bring up one thing that not related to anything in the work session, but something completely different.
Sure.
As far as our agenda page that we get for the town board work session,
Uh-huh.
I'm kind of wondering on public comment and consent agenda and non-agenda items, 5H. It says a response is deemed appropriate. The mayor may respond on behalf of the town board or refer the matter to the town manager. And I just kind of wanted to point out that already the way it is that the mayor reports and anyone that is on the board can report if they have information, and that's usually what the mayor has done. So I'm wondering if that statement should just say, if a response is deemed appropriate, the mayor may respond or refer to a member of the town board or staff, because that's really what happens anyhow.
I'm happy to shrink a lot of that box anyway.
I actually agree. I think we should maybe put that on a future work session agenda and see how we
talked about
could
April 4th
modify
or
it.
something.
Sounds fine.
Because that was, we had all agreed to do this at one time in the past, and maybe it's time to reconsider.
Sounds good.
April 4th would be not too far away.
Okay.
Anything else? Let's take 2 minutes then before the board meeting. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order a Board of Trustees, regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for February 28, 2011. And Phyllis, if you'd call the roll.
Mayor Andrew Muckle,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Elian Gregoris,
Here?
Trustees Joe Sorelli,
Here,
Chris Hansen,
Here?
Sandy Pennington,
Here.
Lisa Skumatz, Deborah Williams,
Here.
Town Manager Matt Murphy,
Here?
Town Attorney Kendra Carberry,
Here.
Town Clerk Bill Sweden here.
Thanks. That brings us to item number 3, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Oh, thank goodness.
It's a very short agenda, but this is the shortest
Yes,
I've
very
seen
good.
in
All
all the
right.
years I've been here. So I make a motion to approve the agenda.
By Trustee Gregorio, second by Trustee Williams. All in favor? Unanimous. That brings to item number 4, reports, questions, and issues. Trustee Pennington, would you like to start?
Most of us attended the same set of meetings this month, so I'll actually just address a couple of ones that only I attended, or Deborah,
I
Dr.
speak for all of us.
I'm going to speak for all of us in a different aspect, so I'll let Elia catch up the slack on the meetings we attended. But what I wanted to tell the community is that a tremendous amount of work has been done on behalf of the town of Superior in the past 2 weeks. Numerous residents attended the ProStack meeting on Town 9, attended the Planning Commission meeting on Jefferson Parkway, and then we board members met in several different capacities on Jefferson Parkway. I attended, along with Deborah, 2 different Dr. Cog meetings, which are addressing numerous issues, and other board members as well. And I actually find it just really that we're on a fantastic track here, with residents being involved, all of our advisory committees being involved, the town board being very active. So that is sort of the thing I wanted to pull out today. Even I thought it was significant on my block, everybody's putting their trash cans at the curb and not on the sidewalk. So, and that was resident initiated over the CAC. So just little things like that. And last but not least, another plug for CU basketball.
what a
Great game on Saturday, beating the Texas Longhorns. Last game of the season at home, Saturday, 7 p.m., $10. Great family entertainment, and it could determine whether or not we get into the NCAA tournament. So come out for that one.
Might be sold out.
That's all.
Great. Trustee Gregoris?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to thank you, Matt, for providing us with this electronic package. I told my wife I was in love. I have a little thing. I sleep with it. It's great.
I feel for your wife.
She goes, is this thing going to be on all night long? It's great not to bring that whole, pack of all that paper. We're good for the environment, good for us. It's great to have everything stored here. I thought that the ProStack meeting on Town 9 was so well attended. Great feedback from the town residents, great participation of the town board. I would like to use that as an example, actually, of having the town staff, board members, and the public come together and resolve an issue. I think that was, I guess, as good of a meeting as we could have had. If we could duplicate that with other issues around the town, I think it'd be very successful. So I'm just really happy about that. I echo what Sandy said.
Trustee Williams?
I echo everything they've all said, but I'm going to add more. So I had a number of meetings last week. I had a Hodgkin-Harris Reservoir Working Group meeting, and that was with Boulder County, Saddlebrook HOA, Rock Creek HOA, OSAC, which is the Open Space Advisory Committee, ProStack, Parks, Recs, Open Space, I won't name the whole acronym here, POSAC, which is the county's Open Space Advisory Committee, and then farmers from the Carolyn Holmberg, I hope I'm saying that right, Reserve at Rock Creek Farms. So that was a very good perspective that we had not had on the reservoir. And the reservoir is a agricultural reservoir, and it supplies water for the Rock Creek Farms and for the farmers on their crops. So it was never intended to be a recreational reservoir or even an open space, or it's an open space property, but not in the sense of the way we look at open space. So everyone discussed their interest in the reservoir when we came to the meeting, and from each group, which was good. It was great to get a different perspective from everyone, especially the farmers. I have to say that was an eye-opener for me. The county came up with 5 alternatives that we could do with the failed dam and then the future management of the reservoir. There already is a management plan for the reservoir, but it does not include anything involving maintaining the reservoir in the capacity that we're looking at or that the rest of the group is looking at. So their planning process, they've included that there'll be a few more working group meetings. There'll be a public comment period. There'll be a post-SAC recommendation, which is the county's open space committee, and then there'll be a final decision by Boulder County Commissioners. So at least we have, an idea of where it's going to go and where it'll end up. We don't have a timeline at this time. And of course, this is one of the caveats there is the Boulder County is looking for financial partners. Of course, that really is kind of the end of the discussion, basically, and we will, at some point or another, need to discuss that and decide if we're willing to be a financial partner,
Yeah.
and if so, and how much. So
Schedule that for discussion, so.
that, yeah, we need to probably do that. So I thought I'd, if you have any questions, want to know more, just contact me.
Just in terms of process, do you think the county is going to come up with various alternatives and then present that to the board in terms of what our financial contribution would be?
So we already have 5 alternatives, and the working group discussed all the 5 alternatives and how it would meet all the different interests. And the consensus, I'll just say the consensus, there wasn't a vote. The consensus was, the alternative was a full restoration of the dam, which is the
1.1
The most
million.
expensive
yes, of
alternative.
course. I think that was 1.2.
Yeah.
1.2.
Well, yeah, 1.2, and then there was a partial restoration was 1.1. Well, why bother that? You might as well just go the whole way. So now you know how much, and I don't know what Boulder County is going to be asking for,
No.
but at some point we will know.
Presumably a big chunk of change.
Yep.
Certainly not 1.2,
No.
not the whole amount.
And whether there are other players.
And there could very well be other players. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with.
It would be a good grant opportunity potentially with Great Outdoors Colorado. So before we spend all the
thinking of
money,
that
we
too.
should definitely pursue that.
And definitely there may be companies in the area interested as well. So moving on to the next thing, the next meeting I attended was a CML legislative workshop, and this was they basically kind of presented all the House and Senate bills that affect our municipality and other municipalities. And I have a list of ones that we should look and see and kind of monitor that that haven't died yet. And I'd be happy to send that list out. It's involved, and I think we might. I don't think anyone wants to sit and listen for half an hour. So I will be happy to send that information out. And then I also went to 2 DRCOG meetings, a regular meeting and a board retreat, which is like their workshop. The regular meeting was very interesting and very long. And Sandy happened to come for that, and I think after about 4.5 hours, she was ready to kill me. Although I found it quite interesting. It didn't seem like 4.5 hours to me, but anyhow, the city of Denver is asking for the reconsideration of the TIP, the 2012 through 2017 TIP, for a specific project. It's the Peoria and Smith Streets. I don't know if you've heard about it. For a road and railroad grade separation. So basically, they would separate the different rails that come through from the actual road, so that like pedestrians and bicyclists and cars and ambulances can get by. I believe this is right
When
near
a train's
the
coming through.
Fitzsimmons, is that right? Or
It's on-
it's by a hospital, a very crucial hospital that it's the only road to get there, or at least the majority or the main road. So they're asking for $25 million, and MVIC, which is a subsidiary committee of Dr. Cog that decides what projects are in the TIP. They decided, well, we'll give you $15 million, not $25 million. And so Denver is coming back and saying, well, we want the full $25 million, and we don't like, the decision that MVIC has made. We're asking that the board reconsider this and bump off, $10 million to get to the 25. And unfortunately, the majority of what Dr. Cog's staff has recommended are Boulder and Boulder County projects that are in the TIP. So those projects, 10 million of those projects would go to another TIP process, basically, in the future. So we'll see what happens for March. That will be decided in March with the board. So that'll be a really fun meeting. So if you want to come to a really long and interesting meeting, you can carpool with me. Also, the board retreat, I have to say that probably was the best Dr. Cog meeting I've ever been to, or really any government entity meeting. I found it very interesting. We talked about like the metro vision for the entire Denver metro area throughout to 2035, and there were 5 goals that we were asked to look at, and we went through a series of, different little committees that we all broke out into, and then we came back and, brought it to the whole board, voted on it, and I'll be curious to see what the most number of votes. What now?
I would like to second what you just said about this being literally the best Dr. Cog meeting, and frankly, the best regional meeting I've attended.
Yep.
I would
It was well run.
put forth to the board that we ask staff whether or not they'd be willing to bring a shortened version of that to us for a work session, because it was, what was so great about it is to take all of these, the changing nature of real estate development, road development, the aging of the population, et cetera, and really brings it down to a local level to where you can really tangibly feel the implications on the town center or the build-out of the rest of Superior. And they're happy to personalize, they're happy to walk the community with us and personalize it for us as well. So I'd suggest maybe we, in the future, do a work session on that
In
subject.
that format. Yeah, they had a very interesting format.
Maybe invite the planning commission to be part of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great idea.
So it was very effective, and in the end, we were all taking pictures of all these notes that we took on these huge, I don't know what you want to call them, billboards or whatever, and everyone they were allowed 4 stickers, and you can pick 4 things that you thought were the top number 1 things that you wanted done that is new, something that's never been done with Dr. Cog before, and new strategies or new partnerships. So the, little red dots everywhere was quite interesting. And so anyway, I'll definitely report back what ends with that and where we go in the MetroVision.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Definitely. All right, I'm done.
All right, let's see. I think
Half
there's
hour
two,
later.
two things to report on. I had the trip to D.C., and we met with all our reps, Polis, Perlmutter, DeGette, both of our senators, USDOT, and FHWA and FDA. I think it was a pretty productive meeting. It was interesting because we were there just as the time that the budget discussion was ongoing, which was Congressman
Perlmutter?
No, Polis was looking out for our interests, and he actually had to testify at 3:30 in the morning, which was an amazing thing to happen at the Capitol. So the issue is that they're attempting to work on the budget, and I understand that. The issue is that, however, our Tiger Tifia grant is in that process because we're one of the last stimulus transportation packages that has not been done because we've been doing this application for the loan program. So they were clawing all that money back, and it's now up in the air exactly whether or not that's going to go forward. Clearly, everybody in the state is, most people in the state have been supportive of that. Some of the Republicans vote against it because it's a part of a stimulus plan, so by de facto they'll vote against it. But I think we have a lot of support. But it's now not a foregone conclusion of what's going to happen with the Tiger Tifia. And once again, that's sort of a 60, maybe $40 million worth of projects that would go into US 36. So more to come. And the last one is that Channel 9 got interested in our solar project, and so I'm going to meet with Greg Moss tomorrow. So
Bright and early.
Bright and early in the morning. Oh, dark 30.
You're going to be on
So-
TV?
That's what they say. So we'll see how it goes.
For Channel 9 tomorrow morning.
Yep.
Live?
Live.
Oh, good. At what time?
What time?
5, something like that.
And they thought they said they were going to rebroadcast it at 8.
So we'll see how it goes. But I thought it was interesting that they caught wind of our project. So that's all I have.
Called Wind of Our Solar.
Caught wind of our solar rays, exactly. Trustee Skumatz.
Let's see. I attended a CML Policy Committee meeting, and looks like in my hurry I didn't bring those documents, but you can't really go through them in a forum like this in any case. And I don't want to bore everybody with a big, long presentation about it. So instead, I'll as usual, forward the findings to the other board members, and I did already forward them to Matt. Let's see. The other thing I want to say is that the Recycling Conservation Advisory Committee meeting also had a meeting last week, and I also met with Boulder County about the Energy Smart program. And the Energy Smart program is, as I mentioned last time, a program where residents can get audits, and they don't just sort of leave you with an audit and then you're sort of left to figure out what to do next. The Boulder County has a person who sort of does hand-holding and installs some measures in your home, including CFLs and some weather stripping type stuff, and then helps you get estimates from contractors, and then also has some short-term, has some 3-year, I think, financing available for measures that you might want to put in place. The audit costs, it's a discounted audit, and I'm going to say it's a really thorough audit with blower door tests and all the rest of that stuff, and it's about $100. But you get a lot of, if you don't have many CFLs in your home already, you get sort of free CFLs at the same time that maybe could add up to a fair chunk of change, as well as shower heads and some, as I mentioned, weather stripping. It's a really great program. There's the phone number is, I think, on Channel 8, and if not, it's
on the website as well.
It's in our website. It's also in the last newsletter. I was really, the RCAC would really like to challenge Superior to have the highest participation per capita or per household in the county. We are not doing that yet. It would be really great to do that. I think that a lot of our homes, if my home, if Joe's home, if others that I know of, what kind of results they got are any indication, there's a lot of work that could lead to a whole ton of savings and would pay back really quickly. So I really urge the citizens to look into that. As part of that project, we're also holding a meeting in March, and I think Jay and the committee were going to come up with the final date, but in the late part of March, we're having a 1-hour sustainability and energy smart meeting here at Town Hall that we'd love residents to come to. We'll get that. There's going to be something on Channel 8, and we'll make sure and get that out to the residents.
Yeah.
I think it's also maybe in the next newsletter.
Yep.
I think those are the main things. Thanks.
Thanks.
And I did do that energy audit, and it's great. But you have this huge document of all these different things you need to do, and you're like, whoa, where do I go next?
Thanks.
Trustee Sterling?
Well, on the, I did attend same meetings in town that most of the other trustees attended. I was impressed by both the Jefferson Parkway meeting that the Planning Commission chaired and the comments that we received from residents, and it sparked some thought that particularly where we're going as a town and how we're going to respond, in not just to the Parkway, but more generally how we're going to respond internally with our roads and with our economic development. And so we can talk more about that later tonight. The ProStack meeting, the meeting ProStack chaired on the neighborhood park at Town 9, or some other name to be determined. Heard some sentiment about that. Was a good meeting, and I think it's incumbent. It started some momentum that I'd like to see continue, and that we actually bring this park home in the foreseeable future. Like hopefully by the end of next year, I'd love to see. And ProStack, I know, is working hard on this, and the town residents, particularly in Original Town, I would love to see that, and they're participating, so that's great. Final meeting that Chris and I, Trustee Hansen, attended was the executive committee of the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council. So we're not members of the executive committee because those are basically the officers of the Stewardship Council. They had a meeting they have new officers, and their meeting was basically to determine how they're going to do business together. But it was an interesting executive committee meeting to attend because they talked a lot about the next agenda for the April meeting, is it? And one of the key items is the Department of Energy was scheduled to give the Stewardship Council a briefing on the type of soil monitoring that was done in the outer part of, not in the buffer zone of Rocky Flats, and that's significant to understand what was done there to know whether we have concerns about what may be done in the near future on land surrounding Rocky Flats or land that might be sold by the Fish and Wildlife Service. And there's a lot of discussion about what that briefing should address. And oddly enough, the discussion was enough that the briefing should address the concerns of the members of the coalition. So rather than get a briefing in April, we're going to have the April meeting is going to discuss what our concerns are, so that the June and possibly September meetings with DOE will actually try to address our concerns. So we're going to get a bunch of materials between now and April to understand what was done, to bring forth our concerns. And I would think it would be very interesting for anybody in this town interested in the issues around what may be happening in development around Rocky Flats, they might want to be at the June and September meetings when DOE actually briefs the kind of sampling that was actually done in the buffer zone that satisfied the state and federal government that Rocky Flats, at least that part, was satisfactorily clean, and whether you feel comfortable that, you know, things can still happen around there or not. So that's just something to stay tuned to. Stewardship Council, I think, is getting very much in tune with what our concerns are right now. And we'll, Trustee Hansen and I will try to keep you all advised, but particularly let you know when those two meetings are in June and September.
Great, thanks.
And that's
Trustee Henson?
Yeah, I was really encouraged by that meeting, because at one point, I was led to believe that the Stewardship Council was going to take a neutral position on anything that had to do with the Jefferson Parkway, but it looks like they're actually will be discussing requiring samples being taken from that right-of-way. So I thought that was real positive. iPad, just to reiterate what Ely had said, I agree that these are great. We're not only going to save the town money, but just time, ease of use, planning, it's so much better. Economic development. I think we've got as many surveys completed that we're going to get. I sent out the request to take the survey to 75 different people, and we got about 50% respond, and then about another 50% of that actually completed the survey. So we've got a nice sampling. But of that, we've got about a dozen people that want to be on the committee and move forward. So that was really encouraging. So the next step is to evaluate the assessment, come up with a report, and then call the meeting. And I hope to have that happen within the next couple of weeks. I wanted to do it sooner, but with the Jefferson Parkway stuff and everything else, it just hasn't happened. Trustee Pennington and myself started visiting businesses last week and doing a quick survey with them, but getting their feedback. And this will be something that's an ongoing process, perhaps quarterly, that will follow up with the same type of survey so we can see if our efforts are working. Attended a ProStack meeting. Lee from Lee Likes Bikes was there and discussed his plan to get the bike park completed. Construction will start the 12th of March, and it should be done the 20th, I believe it was. He's calling out for all volunteers right now. Aaron Atwell on ProStack is leading that charge. So if anybody wants to be involved in that process, whether you have a half hour or you've got all day on those weekends of the 12th and the 19th, get in touch with Aaron. Also, Martin Benz is a Boy Scout, local Boy Scout, who is doing an Eagle Scout project at the dog park, and he's going to be putting up the fence around the dog park. So he was there, presented a very nice presentation on his plan of attack. It was like a 9-page document on everything that he needs to do, the time frames, everything. Very organized, so I'm looking forward to that. And then
Do you know when he's doing it?
he's starting it
This week.
first week of March?
Yeah,
First
this coming
weekend.
weekend.
Okay.
right when bad weather comes again. Huh?
Yeah. We have a fallback date for that if that happens.
And again, agree with the other trustees about the recent meetings that the town has had. The Planning Commission meeting I thought was just very well organized. The Planning Commission did a super job on allowing that meeting to flow smoothly. There was no issues, a lot of good comments on both sides, but a really good meeting. And then the Town 9 meeting I thought was great too. And I hope that the residents of Original Town see this as an indicator of our seriousness of making Town 9 exactly what they want. And this will happen. And that's it.
Great, thanks.
May I make one comment?
Yes, Trustee
So I
Smith.
also attended the Town 9 meeting, and it was a very interesting discussion. My only comment, and maybe it was already made, was that probably 3/4, if not more, of the attendees were either on ProStack or town board. And I was sorry that more of the residents weren't able to make that meeting, and I don't know what it takes to get more residents out. Thanks.
Anything from the town
Is
clerk?
this- Sorry, that was the ProStack meeting that you were talking about?
The Town 9.
Oh, okay, great, that's good to know.
Town clerk?
No, I don't think.
Town manager?
Just a couple items. So we got our preliminary census data on our population, and I include that in the digest. So what we've been saying in the last few years has been confirmed as far as our population figures go, so that was good. And then our Boulder County's given us June 3rd, kind of as a tentative date for opening of the trailhead, the Colton Trailhead. So once that's firmed up, we'll let everybody know, get the word out to everybody. I guess it's already being used. So.
Looking good.
And then the last thing, one other thing. So we had word today, and Trustee Sorelli mentioned this during the break. We've been in the news that a group called Blackstone is going to purchase Centro's U.S. assets, which would include the marketplace, for a paltry $9.8 billion. But, so I think that'll be good for us. So once we have more goes along with that and the deal is finalized and the transfer takes place, we'll see if we can meet with their representatives once they have them in place. I'm sure they'll be contacting us as well. So because they'll have to have the property managers set up.
Right, so I assume that you don't know the inner workings of Blackstone, but hopefully they're keeping the same managers in place for a while to address concerns.
I don't know. Yeah, they have the news article said they had over $100 billion worth of U.S. assets already in place, so they might have the infrastructure in place to where they can pick up their locations that they're getting and have the staff for that already.
And since you bring up Centro, I just have to ask, any news about Arby's that you could share with us at all?
Citation has been issued, so they'll be, I believe, in the next court with regard to that. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And then the last thing I had was coyotes. So we've been getting a lot of calls, emails. Martin's taken quite a few from concerned residents about coyotes. Martin and Alan Macbeth, our superintendent of parks and open space, have quite a bit of, and Kendra actually has quite a bit of knowledge on this one as well through her Greenwood Village days. But they have a plan in place that involves the ammonia-soaked balls that they're going to throw to try to discourage the dens. They're going to walk the known activity areas of these coyotes to see if they could come up with some kind of mow down some of the areas in front of the dens to try to discourage that, place these balls throughout the activity areas. My question for the board is, do we want to look at doing anything in addition to that? Do we want, other options include hiring a company to come in, maybe try and trap them, or go on that last.
What's bringing on the need?
Mating season.
Food.
Yeah, and Martin he's got more information on this as well, but, and I sent you an email from him earlier this afternoon, but it's their active time of the year with the pups in the springtime. So that's kind of the biggest thing right now.
We live next door.
I
Yeah.
don't mean to be I don't mean to be a bleeding heart or whatever, but there's this balance of do we want open space, but then we don't want some of the animals that we're trying to encourage with the wildlife,
The
whatever.
concern we're hearing is
I got that email actually. Early on,
about
I
the
forwarded
packs.
on. Yeah.
And that's the bigger
But I
concern
wouldn't
rather
wanna
than
see
just the
us-
individual coyotes roaming around.
Okay, I wouldn't want to see us do something
Drastic.
deadly, I guess.
Well,
yes.
that's one option as well.
I really. Isn't the whole point of having?
I'm just throwing out all the
Yeah, okay.
options.
It probably makes sense to have the division have a meeting with the
Right.
Division of Wildlife and our
Yeah.
parks folks to understand. This always happens in people that are living in areas like the town of Superior where there's human wildlife
Interaction.
conflicts or interactions, and so it's hard to find the right balance. So.
Right. Yeah.
We live next to open space, and at least once a week in the middle of the night, like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, I hear them celebrating.
Yeah.
So they caught something. I know that.
But that's
You know,
And I
You
like
hear
that.
it.
Yeah.
it's just the way. That's part of life. That's
I live across Bear Hay, and I hear them every night.
almost every night.
That's what they do.
They're loud.
It's great.
I think the concern is, packs of coyotes walking in the midst of a residential developing, killing
Pets.
pets,
Yeah.
and then the concern is, well, would they attack some person? So
It was a more dramatic
Right.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So that is our plan of action on what we're going to do. And like I said, we've had discussions with the Division of Wildlife Agents, and we'll continue and take a proactive approach to try and discourage. And then we can take, additional steps as far as hiring a contractor to come in and maybe look at trapping them if you want to try that.
What's the impact of these balls and other things? It's
Martin's the best one for that.
Good evening, Martin Toast, town staff. So the ammonia-soaked tennis balls are a repellent because it smells like another animal and it's marked their territory. So it's a disruptive measure. It discourages them from entering into another animal's territory.
yes.
So that's the purpose. The ammonia is similar to what's in urine.
So it gets put like along our pathways, or I don't understand, or you put it in their den and then it completely freaks them out.
We throw them. We don't go near the dens. We throw them where we think there might be a known location where the coyotes might have been either staying. Sometimes it's hard to tell where they've recently been staying versus where they are actively and might be having pups at the current time. So if there's some tramped down brush, sometimes if there's footprints when there's snow, if there's the droppings from coyotes that are concentrated in an area, it makes sense to throw the tennis balls into the matted down weed areas and some of the other areas where the plants have been, show the evidence. And it's worked well in some other places. The last year there was some similar activity in the area of Community Park along the creek, and there were some real obvious dens, and the tennis balls worked as an effective discouragement.
Discouragement from what? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Getting
So
closer
discouragement
to
from-
getting closer to areas where people live.
That
But
too,
if you're
yeah.
putting it in their den, then that's not. Then you're sort of driving out into where the people are. It's supposed. I don't.
not
Yeah.
in the
I don't. I don't. I guess I'll have to talk with you guys offline. Sorry about that, but
Sure,
I
but
didn't.
the short answer is they travel along the Rock Creek drainage way, and if it's not hospitable to set up a den, they won't come as close and encroach into the neighborhoods. That's been the effective behavior modification at this point.
So what are these tennis balls do to animals like dogs and cats? Or
Makes them not want to hang around.
Everybody stays away. Basically.
okay, so a dog isn't going to play with the tennis ball.
No,
Unlikely.
no. It's literally ammonia, the thing that
Here, pets.
you see around the house. You wouldn't want to take a whiff of it, and no pets or animals would want to do that either.
Do they work for tulip beds and rabbits?
There have been a few. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, Trustee Sorrell. So there's been a few folks that have called and wanted to know if there's something they could do around their house, and there have been a few folks that have placed the ammonia-soaked tennis balls on the inside of their fence line as an effective deterrent, because the smell, as you know, if you smell ammonia coming off a tennis ball, it'll penetrate a fence. It'll penetrate the 6-foot dog ear fence that's around most homes here.
Were those people reporting that it was effective?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Magley?
Nope.
Anything from the town attorney?
No, thank you.
All right, that brings us to item number 5, public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items.
Good evening, Board. Couple questions.
I'm sorry, George.
Deborah, were you talking about the lake down
Jo-
here off 88th Street that you
George, just can you tell us where you are, where you're from?
I'm George Cutman, 109 South 4th Avenue,
Just for the
Superior,
record.
Colorado.
Yes.
My zip code is Louisville, 80027.
Very good, thank you.
Deborah, were you talking about working with the county commissioners on a lake down here off 88th? Is what?
Yes, I am.
Suggestions. Is there any possible way of suggesting to put a little off-street parking down there since it's open space, and maybe stocking that pond with fish so we could have a little fishing down there on this end of the county?
Well,
Be nice. I'm not a fisherman, but it'd be nice for other people to enjoy that.
we discussed that in the working group that we had, and the farmers did say that would not be beneficial for them. So that's something we'll have to discuss further, but probably unlikely.
Well, when I was a young man, we used to fish down there, and it was catfish. And different types of fish. No restrictions on staying off open space. You got permission to go in there, and it was enjoyable at
Well,
that time.
no, I agree with being able to go on the open
Okay.
space. That's
Because
not
most-
the issue. I think
Most
it's
open space you can't
stocking,
use, and we buy it.
it's stocking the pond with fish that may be an issue for the
Okay.
farmers. But, you know,
Now I want to ask the board or director of Public Works, when the warranty's up on the south end of town, as far as the curbs and gutters are concerned, the alley's never been fixed down there, and I have talked to some board members about how that could be fixed. Not a lot of expense compared to what they're talking about. If the warranty ain't up, I'd like to see them cracks in them curbs and gutters get fixed down there. We paid for it, let's get it fixed under warranty. I don't know if it's under warranty yet or not, that's what I was going to ask you. And while we're on the south end, when are we going to do something with Coal Creek? Is it coming up for repaving this year? And is the citizens going to have some input on that street out here or not? We just about fall through the holes now to the mine shafts. I mean, they're that bad, some of them. Especially if you got old cars. Now, if you got brand-new cars, you've got air ride, you have no problem. And I don't have them. So I'd like to know that question coming up, okay? Answer, please. Next thing is the Urban Drainage and Renewal Authority, and I don't know how many of you have on it or not on it, but I see we have in the deal here a $200,000 expenditure for that. Does that mean that the town is going to clean that creek up? And if it is, I think it needs to be done immediately, not 2 years down the road from now, 3. If you'll drive across the bridge and look to the west, you'll see all the trees that's fallen in there, and the town owns the bridge right below it. If we did get high water, which in my lifetime I've seen 4 floods in this town, 2 of them, one was taking the bridge out, 2 of them, I can't remember the other one, but 2 of them is taking that bridge out. I think we need to go in there and clean those trees out of that creekway to the west, especially to protect that bridge. Not so much to the east, but because we got a bigger bridge down there, but that bridge is insufficient.
So the answer to that question is the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District, if they accept a project, they potentially would use that, they would use their funds actually for clearing the creek out, but whether or not they're, I'm not sure what the end result of the study is going to be, so.
When's this going to be up, though, Mayor? We don't want to wait too late until we wash the road out down there.
I agree.
I'd like to see something done like they did up at Ambrose's Park when they bought 1.25 acres up there. They cleaned it immediately. And that cost $20,000, and I don't think it would cost that amount of money to clean that west end, go in and ask the property owner, which is a real nice person if you approach him right, and I don't think he'd bother him a bit if we'd done that. Now, here's a question I'm going to ask you, and I bet you can't tell me because I can't answer it myself. Does the town have a policy on disposing of the town properties? I'm talking about desks, chairs, computers, vehicles, anything the town owns. Do we have a policy set forth where we have to do something with the town? I don't know anything myself. Maybe you do, Mayor, or any of you, the rest of you. And if we don't, I'd like you to advise the attorney over there, which comes twice a month here, to draw us up some kind of a regulation, rule, resolution. I don't care what it is, and let's get it on there immediately. And I have good reasons why I want this done.
Can you explain the reasons?
Pardon?
Share
Can
with
you
us?
explain the reasons?
I will later when I got black and white in my hand.
Okay.
I don't. But I'm just saying, I go to a lot of auctions over to Boulder County, and they have county auctions to auction their stuff off. Not only Boulder County, you can go to Rollers and you can catch City of Adams City and all kinds of Brighton, and whatever you want. And they auction all their equipment off. They don't dispose of it any other way than the public having an opportunity to to purchase that equipment.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
So I'd appreciate if something be done and some thought given that, because I really don't know of anything.
Okay, thanks. Additional public comments?
I'm George Kuffner, 7520 West Cochran. I think I gimp almost as bad as my dad. Talking about the coyotes, just a tiny bit. I mean, I live right next to the trail. And I have very little sympathy for the people that are worried about their dogs. Because they bring their dogs up the trail there, and they turn them loose. And they get, 100 yards, or if they see a rabbit, they take off after the rabbit. And just less than about a month ago, I thought it was kind of funny. There was a guy, and he had 2 dogs, a little bitty one, and he had a big golden retriever stalled up. And I was standing with my brother, and I said, the dog, he was way down by our place, and the dog was up at the corner, up by the yellow gate. And this guy's hollering at his dog, and I'm looking at him, saying, look at that coyote. And this coyote's about 10 foot from him. All of a sudden, the dog notices the coyote. So the coyote lets him get within about, yard and a half, and he starts running towards the creek and keeping about a yard and a half distance. I mean, he's not just flat out running him. He's egging me on. And I kept looking, and he got him down there about, a couple 100 yards, just down there. And I look, and I see, there's another one. And what he was doing is he was coaxing the guy's dog to get him down there, and they were going to eat him. Believe me, 2 or 3 of them will get him. And that guy finally seen that second coyote, and he started screaming like he was mashing his kid. I mean, you hear him attack more. Started screaming, his dog's name was Elvis. Started screaming Elvis across the and he's running out. He's going out there. But you know what I'm saying is if his dog would have been on the leash, no problem. Right. You know what I'm saying? So when you get up and say that people are worried about their pets, well, they need to take care of them. And they think they're on open space, and they turn the dog loose. And the dog goes after a rabbit, and the coyote's there.
But sometimes pets actually have been eaten in their backyard.
Oh,
back into open space, they jump over the fence. So that's different, I think.
I had a little Boston Terrier. She weighed about 15 pounds about a year and a half ago, and we opened the door, and we didn't see her go out the front door. She didn't go out in the little fence yard. Somehow she got out the front door. And we probably noticed her gone within 15 minutes. Where's Pidge? Never hide no hair. I won't lie to you guys. If she'd have went out and died somewhere in the yard, we'd have found parts of her. Nothing. The coyote took her and took her straight to the creek. And that's what you sleeping at the wheel cost me my little dog. So I mean, I don't like them either. But I mean, we bought the open space in the Great Places. We bought it, and that comes with it.
Yep.
That's kind of like you don't get a Hunt Spring Bear no more because of the jelly glazed donuts. Look at all the bears we've got. No, I think it's neat to see them out in the wild. Even though they are a pain, but they're neat. So thanks.
Thank you. Additional public comments? Seeing none, I'm now turning my thing back on, which brings me to 6 presentations. No presentations tonight. That brings us to item number 7, consent agenda, and on the consent agenda is approval of the minutes of the February 14th, 2011 Board of Trustees meeting, acceptance of the minutes of the Historical Commission, the Open Space Advisory Committee, the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Advisory Committee meetings, adoption of a resolution approving an agreement with the Rock Creek Masters Homeowners Association for facility use. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda by Trustee Skumat, second by Trustee Gurguris. Further discussion regarding this? I think we're sort of spending money, so.
Hanson,
Yes.
Gregores,
Yes.
Cirelli,
Yes.
Pennington,
Yes.
Buckle,
Yes.
Skumatz.
Yes, except I wasn't at the last, so abstain from the minutes.
Okay. Williams?
Yes.
Great, thanks. That brings us to item number 8, which is a discussion and adoption of a resolution approving the capital improvement projects working sheets. Mr. Magley.
Thank you, Mayor. This item was pulled from the last meeting so that the entire board would have an opportunity to review and comment and provide staff direction on the CIP working sheets. I'd just like to from my perspective, the main point of these working sheets is to nail down the public process and what the public process is that we want to use, not so much the actual management of the CIP projects. So that's kind of the way staff looked at it when we drafted them. And Trustee Skumatz sent an email to the board, I think, this afternoon with some of her comments. And I would open it up to the board as far as revisions to the sheets or discussion with relation to that email.
So I had, if I'm going to my annotations somewhere, but I think if I remember that correctly, my note to myself was, what are we trying to achieve tonight? Is it just what the sheets look like, or are these actually approving specific? Because I'll have a lot of comments if there's, we're approving specific projects in here, or or is it really to just do what the outline is?
In my opinion, it's to nail down the exact format
Okay.
that we want to use.
Okay. Great. Trustee Skumatz, did you want to weigh in?
Sure, that'd be great. So I really appreciated you responding to so many of the, I don't want to say picky details, but kind of, to me, they were really important, and you responded to most of them with, you can fit that in. I think there were maybe three that we wanted to discuss maybe a little bit further. And one is the first comment that I had, which was one of the things we were really interested in finding out about the public process is also making sure that we have a really good documentation, I guess, about who was how many people were notified and in what way they were notified about public hearings and any other important steps in the process. I think that was really important to me. I know it's really important to Trustee Pennington. I'm certain it's important to all the board. But that was one thing that I understood that was meant to be a fairly big priority on this as well, was to make sure that we track the public process in terms of how many, et cetera, we do for the public process.
And from staff's perspective, we talked about this on the phone earlier today. That process for notifying residents is laid out in Chapter 16, and it has specific chart in there as far as whether we mail out notification and how many days prior to, and how many households within 1,000 feet or a minimum of 50 houses. So I don't know.
And all
if
we're looking for is to document that in this form, so that when someone turns to that particular project, they say, oh yes, those letters went out, and if I get a call from a resident saying, I never heard this, I can say, those letters went out on a particular day.
So maybe just a notation in
All
there
we were
of
looking
the
for.
Chapter 16
Number,
requirements?
how many.
Okay.
That's all I was looking for.
And if I can elaborate just a bit, now that we're all on iPads, just do a note that says, so we can enlarge the note and say 50 notices sent X date, or e-blast to entire e-blast list X date. Particularly where residents are involved, I'd like to have every detail of that notification documented.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Any notification to residents of any kind regarding a project, I think, must be documented. That is, having been a vocal resident for a long time on that particular thing, the question was, when should we have found out about this? So I would like to definitely do what Lisa suggested and have it in our records in some way. If it's just as a note, how we can make a note here that documents it so that we always retain that documentation.
Sure. We can just include it in the notes and put the date that it was sent out.
Okay.
And because there could be multiple notifications, I think we talked about adding a notes column sort of down the right, so that associated with any line, we can have notes. And so I think that's where that could go. So there'd be a new column.
Oh.
That could work.
Well, I thought we could just do bullets at the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it'll have specific dates.
So, okay. Number 4, the comment I had next was, it's about 4 and 5. So you mentioned the overall philosophy that you're looking at. This is sort of managing the public process.
Right.
From some of the early discussions with the board, we were kind of also interested, I took it to be that we were interested in sort of whoever was responsible for moving things forward or accomplishing something, whether that's town staff, a consulting engineer, or whatever, that we would be noting that. Right now, the way the form exists, both consulting engineers and town staff activities happen behind the scenes. We will get who the project manager is, but we won't kind of get any interim steps or whatever denoted. That may or may not be a problem. That was something that we wanted to discuss with the board. I don't know. I guess I wasn't sure. I suspect there's a lot more substantial that happens with the town staff than almost simply arranging a planning commission meeting and making sure they have the data. The papers, but what is that?
To me, that gets to more managing the project, which is the staff's responsibility, rather than managing the public process, which I thought, is what we're trying to accomplish with the sheets. So.
And I don't know if we're trying to manage as much as document that it got done, or that. So I'm willing to go either way on this for a first draft, but I really want to hear the input from the rest of the board. I was hoping for more, but it's not something if the rest of the board's sentiment isn't there, then I don't want to go, that far. Any other board comments on that one?
No, I agree 100%.
Yep.
That
I'm
you
trying to-
need to put the responsible person for each line item down, I think.
Help me. What do you mean by each line item?
Well, if each process that's being tracked, who's ultimately responsible for it to be done? So if Kurt is the project manager of the overall project, he's not going to do he's not responsible for every single
he's
thing.
responsible for managing his staff and consultants.
I
If the board has questions, they would ask me, and in turn, I would ask Kurt.
I'll go with the consensus of what the board wants, but my personal view is I'm not qualified to be a project manager. I don't want to sit in the shoes of a project manager. I don't want to act like a project manager. It wasn't what I was elected to be doing, and that kind of detail is really not what I need. I need to know Kurt's running it.
Maybe one of the complexities here comes to me when, let's say that ProStack doesn't meet its first deadline of something or other. Maybe that's ProStack's deal, but maybe it's, in fact, the fact that they didn't get something in a timely way from staff, and how do we make sure that responsibility is clear, that it wasn't ProStack, they had the meeting the day after they got the stuff, or something like that, but that wasn't in accordance with the deadline.
From my perspective, I agree with Joe. And actually, I need less detail than that, because I'm going to say, if something doesn't get done, well, the buck stops at your desk, Mr. Magley, and if that doesn't get done, you're responsible for managing your staff. We're not responsible for managing your staff, and if it doesn't get done, then I'll be asking you why it wasn't done. So, Trustee Pennington.
I'm going to take the middle ground on this one. I think as we grow into this whole process, there will be times where a step falls into the more detailed step, but it's a critical step that we say, could you include it in your set of items here? And I guess I am comfortable with sort of the good faith effort here, that if that step, we ask you to document that step in this grid, that you will document it. And I've gotten your verbal assurances. So I think we're learning with this. We modify it as we go, and hopefully by the end of the 6 months of experience with it, a year's worth of experience, we'll be able to answer more in detail. We'll be able to answer better. Do we need more detail, or are we okay with the detail provided? So I'm willing to let the process mature.
And I think that's in line with the suggestion I was sort of
Oh,
having.
okay.
Trustee Gregores.
I tend to lean more with Joe and the mayor, less micromanagement. We trust you unless proven otherwise.
Thank you.
So, and that goes for the town staff as well.
Trustee Williams?
So I'd like the idea of putting narrowing down a schedule and not saying this quarter, first
Right.
quarter, second quarter. I'm happy with month, or first part of the month, second part of the month, something a little, if that works. But I'm okay if there isn't an actual date, because I think it's pretty hard to, actually make that work for a specific date. I think that would be very difficult. As far as the specific responsibilities under the staff, I'm happy to know, that I don't care whether you put that or not. It's fine that you put Kurt is responsible for that, but that's not a deal killer for me. Although this is a deal killer for me, I think the approval of a grant should be after.
Just about to get there.
After the approval of a design. And just so everyone understands, I am reading and going down a list about 9 bullet points that are not my suggestions. They are Lisa Skumat's suggestions. And for the most part, I'm supporting almost all of them. And I just wanted to comment on a couple of these specifically. So the only one I really, I'm not big on a specific date, but the grant is important to me. The design contract or the concept design review, I think, is kind of important to know, because it's hard to determine where we are at in that process, and that would help the resident. And I'm thinking from a resident standpoint, what does the resident want to know? Well, they don't really care that Kurt is working on that specific part of the job. They just want to know where it is in the process, so they know when to come down and speak or when not to. So that's kind of how my perspective here is.
So, Deborah, what, in this project schedule, in this grid, are you suggesting the changing of an order regarding the grant?
And, I'm going to refer that over to Lisa, because
Okay.
that was her idea, and I am supporting that idea.
Trustee Skumatz?
Grant number 6 grants was the next one I was going to raise, and then maybe we can get everybody's comment on that, and then go on to the next one. Okay, thanks. So I thought I was very. I did not want to see grants as early in the process as it was. It was the second step, basically, in the process, and that would seem completely out of. That was one of the big hot buttons that we had in the last project, and it's been an ongoing issue. I suggested that we move it back, and I thought at least after the second project review would be an appropriate point to start looking at grants, because we can't, and that was a possibility that Matt was going to look at as the likely best place for it as well. We can't apply for, as you know, we really shouldn't be applying for grants before people have agreed on what we were going to do for the project. So
Yeah.
that was the
That
basic
makes sense.
concept.
Yeah.
Yes.
My only comment on that is that it probably makes sense to maintain some flexibility in all of this, because what happened last go-around is that, we know that we're moving down this certain pathway. The grant cycles come up twice a year, and so if you're thinking that you're going to go for a grant and you want to wait until way into the process, you might be delaying the whole thing by 6 months. So that's the only downside.
That's the purpose of this project, so that you see when the grants are coming and you backtrack and reverse engineer to when you need to start the work on the project. That's what we're trying to avoid.
Well, your point is very well made. Definitely, the order on any project of these items must make sense in the order they occur in actuality. So I'm assuming we're going to have flexibility. Apply for grants may come later, it may come earlier, depending on the nature of the project. So again, I'm encouraging flexibility, but I think you make a good point, Lisa.
we don't want to get into that kind of a box again, if we can avoid it. The next one, 7, is everyone's, is that an okay?
Just for the
yes.
record and the viewing public, if you could give a synopsis of that.
What I said was if I understand design, contract, and the concept design review stages properly, then I think we need something earlier than that, which would be a town board discussion of the major design elements, or a committee, or a town meeting on those major design elements prior to design, concept, and design contracting. I recognize that it will be, I felt that it was too early to get sort of some contractor or others involved in specifying the elements of a park or whatever before it went to committees or board or other things first. I recognize that we'd have to then make sure that we had some gross costs associated with it, but for instance, that conceptual design, the conceptual elements thing that we did for the Town 9 meeting last week, I think was sort of the thing that needs to happen before we go into these other more formal processes. So that's kind of where I was coming from. I wanted to get a more involving process before we sort of come into a formalization of the project. So that's kind of where I was coming from. It may be addressed already in the forms, but I wasn't sure that was guaranteed in the forms, and so I guess that's what I was hoping to do, make sure that kind of a first discussion happens before we get something too formal.
And my thought on that is we would have like a work session or something like that. But sometimes to get good feedback from the committees that we're looking for, from the public, we need to have some designs to
Show them.
Exactly.
I know.
And depending on what the contract amount is, we may have to approve that money to be spent
Right.
for us to proceed further on the project. So that's kind of, but we'll have that flexibility to where, as a staff, we'll have to determine if that's the case.
So,
But where
So maybe
would it go?
Let's
Let's
see
just
what's-
take one of these, for example. That is
Well-
appropriate, one of these,
look at the,
Park particularly.
yeah, it's park-type things, the vague things, not like streets, repair or something, but something more, isn't there a park one in here?
well, or we can just conceptualize. So, for example, if we were at the early stage of concepting for 3 parks, using the order of project schedule, the first one in our packet, which, is the Rock Creek underpass, just using the order of those
Right.
items on the left side under project schedule. Where would you see sort of the concepting with the public or the initial concepting work at the board level before we go out for a contract? Where would it fit in here?
Well, I think the town would have to spend some money up front on that one with the design contract.
Well, what I'm saying is
as
even
an
broader than
example.
that, saying, well, we sort of want a dog park, we sort of want
So what you would
a...
have there is you would have the public process hammered out with the first line, project schedule review approved by the board.
Oh, that's where you're saying it.
And then we would have approval of design contract, so they could give us, a company could look at the area, come up with some different concept designs, and then we could schedule meetings with ProStack, Planning Commission, the public, and the board, get feedback on it.
See, this is where it's a little confusing. Take a park, but Town 9, okay. That's been in ProStack before we even get to this schedule. And other things have been in ProStack, and they've been meeting with the public, and they're going to give us recommendations, and then maybe we're going to get to working on the schedule at that point in time. So it's sort of stuff that even happens before the schedule in most instances. Sometimes something might come out of the blue, but I don't think usually we'd say, well, let's let's have ProStack look at this first, or let's have the appropriate committee look at this first, and before we got to scheduling anything.
I would say that in that circumstance, we actually aren't even on this.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not a CIP because we haven't even got to that point. It's more
Yeah.
kind of a,
Market research.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. So we're
There wouldn't be
filling
any
out-
timelines for something like that
Right.
because we'd have to
We'll
flush
do
that
it-
out first.
Have to do that uniquely.
Yep.
Well, I guess I don't see that shows like a work session for the elements of it. It says schedule, but it doesn't talk about the project's elements. And I think that's that input I'm looking for before we get to the approval of a design contract. So that's where I'm having the difficulty, and so it'd be great to have that considered either. So, does that make sense?
Approval of a design concept.
Well, that's, you have approval of design contract
Right.
as the third line.
So,
And I'm looking for the elements that go into that design contract discussed either with the board, in a work session, with committees, or some kind of process that gets input from, in which direction we'd like to head.
And from my perspective, that's if you're labeling the numbers from lines 1 through 7 or whatever, that's -2.
But I'd like to, but see that people were never sure that they got that input
Mhm.
on 3 parks or whatever. And I'd really like to see it documented in here somehow, because I want to be able to say, yeah, we had a work session on that, and it was done on such and such a date. Because I never quite got that on some other projects. I know some other people didn't quite get that actually got voted on or discussed or sort of or not fully or whatever. So that's the kind of thing I'd really like to see in here as an additional line of documentation. So, thanks.
Trustee Williams?
Okay, so basically, I don't know if I'm saying the same thing here, but, and I hope I am, that when you discuss something at a work session, it's throwing ideas around and discussing in consensus but no vote. But then suddenly you're going into approval of a design contract. I guess I want to see that there is some kind of process of a vote as to the design direction. Because you're approving a design contract, but there's no design direction.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? I see that as two different things.
Yeah.
I do too, and that's another term for what I was trying to say.
So a line in here that would say committee recommendation with a date, right? And then board approval, design approval.
I personally would put that in the notes section,
Right.
because we're talking about, this is all, when push comes to shove, this is all a budget. I mean, we're talking about the budget right now.
Right.
And so these things are approved and put into the budget. So these things, there's a lot of work that occurs way before any of this occurs that we'll be talking about. Yeah, do we want to even put that into the budget in CIP, or that's not even interesting to us?
I think one way that can be addressed is if within this grid or as the introductory material where it says project description, you could have a paragraph under that that says summary of prior history. And it could be bullets of significant points in the history. Then you go into the current
I
grid.
like that idea.
The only thing I wouldn't want to see, though, is that I wouldn't want something to be able to go to step 3 before we have that homework. And so having it in the table kind of requires that logic. Having it as a bullet at the bottom or a bullet at the
You
top
could make
doesn't
it, you
necessarily
could
do
make
that,
it the
so.
top element in the project schedule grid too, that says summary of prior history. And then when you enlarge it, it's got the points, but it's always there, so that always has to be filled in and relevant histories in it.
I'm willing to flex on how we do it. I just really
Right.
want to make sure it doesn't go to point 3
We can add
before
that
we've had
issue.
that discussion.
I mean, the town nine's a perfect example.
Yes.
If that's a 2000, and that, it just emphasizes to the board the importance of when you approve the budget and the CIP projects in there. I mean, it's not for sure that's going to be done, but I mean, it gives staff direction on what we should be working on in the upcoming year. In the Town 9 project, we've already started community meetings. ProStack's starting to look at it. It'll be talked about during the 2012 development of the budget. and if it's included as work in 2012, then we'll start this.
But we've been told over and over again that when we approve a budget line item, that's not approval for the project, much less is it
yeah,
approval
I
for the
understand.
elements of the project. We're talking about those elements.
That's exactly right. But it does give staff some idea of what they need to start looking at to be working on for the upcoming year.
The
Right. yeah.
project, but
Yeah,
not
yeah.
the elements of that
Right.
project, which we need to have more input on.
Sure.
That's part of,
Yeah.
that was part of the difficulty, the angst we went through last year, particularly in that example.
So
Okay.
can we expand on that just a bit, with Town 9 specifically? So we're going through the process with the community meetings, and then we're going to discuss, once ProStack comes back to us and says, okay, here's what we got from Greenplay, here's what the community wants, and we discuss the budget during the budget process. So in June, that discussion is had. Then when does Town 9, assuming that we approve it, and we want to move forward with it, when does it get put on here?
In January, we'll bring forward the worksheets based on the 2012 CIP projects.
Okay.
And we'll have, using this form, each project listed with schedule of reviews and design and approvals, and bid openings, when it goes out to bid, when the project begins.
So everything has to start on January 1st? We don't sort of have these things say start in June and go till next June or something like that? I mean, I recognize the budget is for a certain year.
yeah,
but
the budget's for the
process
calendar year.
that
Yeah.
represents part of this could start in the previous year, otherwise it's going to be a mighty busy January.
And it can be multi-year.
Well,
I mean,
that's
this
one of
is
the
project
limitations
tracking.
to, I mean, it may be a 2-year project.
Yeah.
If I might, I apologize if I'm repeating something, but I'm getting my techno thing going.
Are you lost?
No. I'm good. Just slow. Anyway, on Town 9, if we could, prior history is, I mean, that's dead and gone. And by all accounts, we're starting over. We've got a fresh plate in front of us, right? So that's right now not a CIP project, but it is, in my opinion, a project we want to track from this point on. And that first item on that new tracking, the new direction for Town 9, is the ProStack meeting with residents. That is that first item that I believe must be documented as we go forward.
It seems like we just said, though, that would have to happen outside of this project.
Well,
And then
if that is, that's why I'm speaking. To the extent that there is a prior history on any of these projects that's relevant, it would be documented in the summary of prior history. But now that we are process-oriented and we are into process documentation on any fresh project that we start, I do believe on those big projects, those significant points in a project's history, they need to be documented. And definitely, I feel that public meeting with ProStack on Town 9 is very significant in the history. It's the exact thing I want to document for residents, that when we have, 15 residents barking about it around town, we can go say, whoa, on January X 2011, ProStack meeting with residents was held. So I absolutely, so I don't want us to get into a CIP-only project orientation on this thing. To me, it's a significant project orientation. So when a project takes on significance, we start tracking it.
It seems like, though, that maybe this process should be done in ProStack also. And so ProStack should have their own tracking system, or the other committees, so that they're tracking each step of the way, that, okay, on this date, we're having our first community meeting, then 30 days after that, we're going to have our second community meeting and present the results of the first meeting. And then once ProStack gets done with all the meetings, they think they have enough information, they have what it estimated cost, then they come to the board and say, here's what we got. We've got a presentation, here's what the community wants, here's about what it's going to cost. And then that gives the board an opportunity to say, yeah, we like that.
I don't necessarily care if ProStack does that tracking. It seems better to me that staff, so Martin, on that one, you would make sure it's on the staff grid. I don't see any, I would like a master, I think, and the staff would be responsible for keeping that rather than necessarily the PROSTAC chairman. If they both, fine. I'm not going to get into that. But I just want to say that Town 9 is a beautiful example of how a lot has happened over the course of history, and residents who've survived through it all, if you put 4 residents next to each other with different views on that particular project, they each have sort of a different view as to what did and didn't happen. So on Town 9, we're in a unique position. It's sort of enjoying a rebirth, if you will. So to me, that first tracking item was definitely that PROSTAC meeting with the community. Whatever we call it, whatever, it's got to be tracked.
Thanks. Okay. And then I think most of the rest of the comments were if nobody else disagreed with them, they were things that Matt felt he could address. One of the things that I thought would be great is if the board could, in a work session sometime or in our retreat or something, come up with a little bit of a documentation about how we decide which steps different projects want to need to have. And I know some of that was done at the meeting recently, but it would be good to get at least what we're thinking in written down, so that we guide both. We can go back and say, oh, that's why we did that, and also so we can guide sort of future boards to see what we were thinking and how they might need to modify or want to modify or not. So that was my last comment on that, and thank you for being so responsive, Matt.
If I could do, Elia just messed my screen up, but, okay. One point I do have on the third project, I believe, the one that is Parks and Rec. Is that the third one in your sequential order here? My recommendation, that particular one, let me read it to you. It says, rehab social trails and being mix area north of Williamsfield, engineer and provide for pedestrian bridge at McCaslin and Coal Creek, link single tree to Coal Creek via rail bed in McCaslin, add soft trail. So 4 projects are incorporated in that CIP. And while that probably all falls into one budget item perhaps, I would actually see this having to be 4 different tracking project schedules, because it's 4 different projects, so that we would track what's happening at McCaslin and Coal Creek, we would track what's happening single tree, what's happening to the soft trail.
That was getting to my point of, I'll have a lot of comments if we're talking about more than just the forms, because there's a lot
Right.
of
Oh, I
there.
see. Okay. Yeah, mine was, I wanted to do that process to where maybe the budget item consolidates a couple projects. The tracking document should unconsolidate and be unique to each project.
I agree.
Thanks. We might be done with that item.
Anything else regarding this?
I would just reiterate from the discussion 2 weeks ago about the dates and try and be more precise. And Matt, I believe you said that you would, as the projects got closer to getting started, you would put more precise dates in there.
Yeah, we're going to
Yeah.
narrow that down to at least months.
Trustee
as
Williams
well.
said that she didn't think that would be a problem, but I say the closer we can be to an exact date, the more responsible we are for the project, and it'll get done. If it's
yeah.
loose, like 3 months or a quarter or whatever, then it could take forever. The project could drag on. But if we've got a date, then we're held to that responsibility.
And one of the reasons I put that I wanted to see at least a month in there also is because if you've got 2 or 3 things happening in one quarter, you could wait. The first stage of that could end up, at the end of that quarter, and the
Right.
other 2 stages are kind of screwed.
And just as long as everyone realizes those dates
Right.
are,
Tentative.
Targets.
could change. Yeah.
Yeah.
Case? Staff? Sure, if there's public comment regarding this tomorrow. But Matt, do you have a clear idea of how how you're going to proceed with this?
Yes.
Okay, any questions that you want to go over that you don't think have been clarified? Okay.
Jim Payne, 2475 Clayton Circle, Chair of ProStack. If I can just comment from a committee perspective, perhaps you could consider, and Town 9 might be a good example right now, a different category, so that once something gets into the CIP category, it follows pretty much what you have. But maybe there's another category which is exploratory or preliminary, whatever you like to call it, that might be a little bit more free-form in terms of the process steps. And essentially, the result would be that staff and the committee could be documenting those preliminary steps and evaluation. But I do agree that it's important, I agree with Trustee Skumatz, that it's important to document the steps. So, for example, on Town 9, I pretty much tried to pull out the stops in terms of getting outreach to the citizens of original town in Sagamore. So, and we still didn't have the turnout that we would have liked. And that's after going door to door personally and knocking on almost all the doors with Trustee Hansen and some other ProStack members in both those areas, and putting flyers on every door and all that sort of thing. So we need to learn from that and understand, okay, what's the problem, what do we need to do? But it also should be recorded that we did a lot to reach everybody. But maybe you might consider a separate category, pre-CIP, that we could document this kind of thing. Thank you.
I just hate 15 separate forms. I'd rather see one, as much information in one place as I can find it. So that's an overriding principle for me.
Anything else about this? All right, that brings us to item number 9, preliminary ordinance regulating areas of state interest and activities of state interest.
I won't touch my mic again. There we go. Thank you,
Mr.
Mayor.
Bagley.
This is a first reading of an ordinance amending Article 34 of Chapter 16, also known as the Land Use Code, regarding areas and activities of state interest within the town. Article 34 covers areas and activities of state interest in the town, but it doesn't include language with specific procedures if something occurs within town in one of those areas.
Can you give us like an example of what would be a state interest within the town of Superior?
Well, I have a number of them, but I'm trying to decide which one to use.
Mineral issues?
Yeah, mining of natural resources.
US 36 interchange.
Well, this one
Interchanges,
Yeah.
large interchanges.
So, design, expansion of highway or an interchange, mining of natural resources on vacant land, natural hazard areas that have historical or natural archaeological resources are some examples of areas.
This gives the board a lot more control. It forces people to come in and apply for a permit for one of these activities. So, again, it has to be within the corporate limits of the town. So that is yet to be determined with one particular application.
It just provides the town with additional protections if we get something in town that needs to be permitted, gives the town options for financial securities, letter of credit if we decide it's necessary, has the permitting process, the public hearing process is all laid out in there.
Requires certain studies, professional consultants, things like that.
Referrals to specific agencies, so all that language is in there now, which isn't in there currently. So
sounds reasonable.
So comments from, or questions from the board?
And because we're trying to get this
I
done
have a
rather
few.
quickly, it's sort of a work in progress. We're taking it to Planning Commission in between your 2 readings.
right.
So is this, so I have a few questions. So is this boilerplate from some other, do other people use this language?
Yes.
I assume that you
We
did.
did not reinvent the wheel.
I'm assuming that was the case. So
We can thank the city of Idaho Springs for a lot.
is that right? Thanks. So, first question I had was, in the document, they're talking about mineral rights and/or transportation issues, and I was wondering, in general, should those processes be broken down specifically for each one being outlined, as opposed to, it seems like they're all part and parcel of the same document?
I think they're broken up because they each require different studies and different criteria.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some general criteria. That's typically the way it's done. There's some general criteria, and then for each of those two applications, minerals being one and highways being another, we add specific criteria, specific studies that would be necessary.
Okay.
So yeah, you have the general criteria up front, and then they're broken out separately with more specific for each one of those.
Okay.
That also allows us, if we ever need to add other activities in areas that might be of significance. Right now, the two that we're facing are minerals and
Mm-hmm.
highways.
Okay. Then, let's see, what is my note here?
And just to be clear, this will only apply, I'll just throw it out there, to the Jefferson Parkway. If the Jefferson Parkway comes into our jurisdiction.
Right.
Even a foot of it, but if any of the parkway comes into the town's boundaries, that's when this.
But if RTD if they wanted to do something,
Exactly.
right, we would have some control. If they wanted to build something, do something different, this would give us some leverage. with it,
Exactly.
Right.
This is intended to apply to any project, though there is a big one that we're all looking at right now.
Okay. So then on what is page number 4 of that document, my note to myself is, there's a whole bunch of referencing to the application.
Yes.
Is there actually an application form, or this is at the direction of the town manager?
This sets out what should be in the application. We can also prepare a form as well that mirrors what is in this
And
document.
we have a development application, and we can just take that and revise it
Okay.
as appropriate.
Right, because if we say we have an application, it'd be good to actually have one that
Exactly.
we could do. So,
Yep.
on that same page 4, which is 163450, can you give me what they're talking about? Surface development, is that roads or mines or all of it, or?
That could be either, depending on what kind of mining and road construction.
Okay.
This is an additional requirement that if there's surface construction, that any holders of severed mineral interests be notified. This is, you may recall during one of your last land use applications, you had certifications about notifying mineral interest holders.
Right.
So that's what this statute requires.
Okay. And then on the next page, in F, I was wondering, there's a lot of talking about projected population of the area being served. Mineral rights it's not really applicable.
Sure.
So that was, it seemed kind of funny that seemed like a detailed, that's why my first question is,
Sure.
should we bring these into specific, and what's general and what should be in a specific category?
Right. I see what you're saying. And we can certainly move some of these into the more specific if they're more appropriate for the highways one. Versus
Yeah, I would leave it to the town attorney to,
Sure.
look at that. That was just an issue I had just in generality.
Right.
On that same page, in land use, detail the agricultural productivity capability of the land affected by the proposal SCS classification. Does that mean something to anybody?
No, I already took that out
Okay.
because I don't know what that means either.
Okay. If it's important, we should define it someplace. So.
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
Okay.
Again, we did this quickly and we're
Sure.
trying to use something that was already written. So.
Yep. I think on the next page there's about trips. I guess you could talk about it in terms of this is in the air quality. How many average daily trips will be generated by the proposal? Seems like more of a transportation thing, although maybe it's applicable to
that
the
applies to mining as well, depending on
How many people are
what
coming.
vehicles they're using to pull the product out.
Okay.
That becomes important in gas mining.
Okay. And then on page 8, it's another thing. This is going too far back, but it's in the level of service of the proposed transportation project. And I was having a hard time following. I think that was in the sort of the general category.
Yes, I see what you're saying.
That doesn't really seem like that's
Yep.
a mine
That should
related.
go into the highway one, I agree.
Sorry. Oh, so this is 163470, page 11, notice of hearing. There's a lot of general things about how a hearing occurs. Shouldn't we just do it per the town's policy or per, all our hearings are going to be done the same way, right? So do we need to specify that or
The
no?
state statute in this case specifies the way that it is supposed to be done.
Okay. Then that answers my next question, too. Page 13 is probably means something to somebody. But the flushing flow, if that's a generally understood term, then we should use that, but that didn't make any sense to me.
I will check on that. I don't know the answer.
Okay. All right, thanks. Same thing with eutrophication, not trophic status. So once again, probably should use terms that we understand, and we should define that, I suppose, in case it's a generally well understood.
And I will check. I'll ask Kurt in the first instance, and then
Sure.
if he doesn't know, we'll figure that out.
In once again, it's too far down. I'm not sure what section this is, but it's in on page 16. Before it's, I just want to make sure that there's a lot of things that say that has to occur, but I want to make sure that that's not the only thing that potentially would be required. So maybe a bullet point I, which would be like, or any other relevant issue.
I'm sorry, where are you, page?
16.
Under
Before,
which section?
above 163490.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
There's a whole bunch of things that are listed that have to occur and be analyzed, but we want to make sure that if something really dramatic, I can't even imagine what it would be, but if some important topic was brought up, we want to make sure that we have some flexibility about analyzing that.
At the board's just,
At the
any other
board's-
topic the board
Right.
considers to be.
That's one thing we can't.
Can't
We
do.
have to
Okay.
list, and I think the reason
Okay.
this is such a lengthy list of
Document.
criteria
Is
is
because we have to do it.
exactly to try to include every possible scenario
Okay.
that we
So
can
if we
think
can
of.
dream up others, we should let you know.
Yeah, if you dream up any more, and there, as you see from the language, a lot of them are quite general on purpose.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
but if you think of any more, let's add them.
Nothing
Agreed.
came to my mind at the time, but that's all I had on that. Trustee Williams?
So I have one that I'm just curious about. It's noted here several times, but I'll give an example on page 9, which is actually page 64 of your packet. Is Dr. Cog shall review the proposed transportation facility and provide information relative to the impacts to the region's 5-year program and the 2020 Transportation Improvement Program, TIP.
Right.
So are you anticipating the next TIP, or should that be more general?
I think
and
it
not
should be more general
and say the current
tip, exactly.
So there's-
and I had actually changed that already as well.
Okay, so then that would be in several different pages
Yes.
as I was perusing through here.
Yep, I noticed that as well.
Other comments or questions about this? Public comment about this? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the preliminary reading by trustee Skumatz. Is there a second? Trustee Williams, all in favor? Okay, we're done with that. That brings us to something. Hang on. What does that bring us to? Brings us to
Exec session.
Executive session.
executive session. I'm trying my hardest here. Hang on. Not doing too well.
Hi, George Leo.
Page 84.
Yes, okay.
Did we approve the CIP tracking sheets?
Yeah.
Yes.
Did we vote on them?
forward. No, just things to move forward on.
Oh.
We gave our comment.
So, sorry. Okay, I'm just going to scroll to that.
But Chris has a good point. Wasn't that a resolution you wanted to
It
approve?
was, but I thought
Oh,
I'd bring
what?
it back
Oh, okay.
based on our discussion tonight.
The mayor asked if he had all the direction he needed.
So I'm going to my, page 84. I'm going to my, that's what I want. Navigating. Watch out. Watch out, I'm navigating. That brings us to item number 10, thank you, which is an executive session to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, develop a strategy for negotiations, and/or instruct negotiators pursuant to CRS 24-6 402(4)(e) regarding the Jefferson Parkway and property acquisition. Excuse me, is there a motion to go into executive session? Trustee Williams, is there a second? Trustee Gregoris, all in favor? Excuse me, unanimous. We're in executive session. Excuse me.